2 matches, 31 days apart. 2 different continents, 2 different surfaces, one on grass in June, one on hard court under the lights in August. And somehow, both times the exact same scoreline, 6-3, 6-4. The same opponent, a former world number 3, walked off both courts having lost to the same 21-year-old in the same way, by the same margin. Like the match had been photocopied and handed back to her a month later. That is not a coincidence anymore. That is a pattern. And now, 31 days after the first one, she has just done it again, beaten a top 10 player for the second time in a single month, using nothing anyone outside her own team can quite explain. Stay with me. Elina was being aggressive, especially in the second set, so I'm very happy. That's the whole quote. That's all she gave the cameras. No fist pump held up for the crowd, no long speech, nothing performed for the microphone in front of her. Just a flat, calm sentence from someone who had spent the last hour and 34 minutes taking apart one of the most experienced defenders in women's tennis, delivered like she was describing someone else's match entirely. No raised arms, no look up at a box full of family, just the walk back to her chair, towel over the shoulder. Sipping water like the next match had already started somewhere in her head. That's the detail that tells you who you're actually dealing with here, not the scoreline, the stillness after it. Washington, D.C. A Friday night in August, the kind of humidity that sits on your skin before the first point is even served. Under the lights. The hard court plays differently than it does in daylight. The ball skids a little quicker off the surface, the crowd noise gets trapped closer to the ground, and every unforced error sounds louder than it should in the silence between points. This was the Mubadala DC Open quarterfinal, a WTA 500 event, one rung below the very top tier of the sport but stacked this year with more former Grand Slam champions than most tournaments twice its size. And on paper, this match had no business being close. In one corner, Elina Svitolina, 131 years old, a former world number 3, 4 Grand Slam semifinals to her name. An Olympic bronze medal from Tokyo, 20 career titles, a resume built over more than a decade at the top of professional tennis. In the other corner, a 21-year-old from the Philippines who, 18 months ago, was ranked outside the top 140 in the world, playing in tournaments most casual fans of the sport couldn't name. This was not supposed to be a rivalry. This was supposed to be an education, the kind veterans hand out to talented newcomers every single week on tour. Instead, it became something else entirely. You could see it in the warm-up if you knew where to look. No nerves. No stiffness in the shoulders, just work. By her own team's account, the routine barely changes from tournament to tournament. Up before 6 most mornings on match days, a short hitting session with her coach to feel the ball rather than fix anything. Then hours of nothing headphones in, phone mostly untouched. The kind of quiet that looks almost boring from the outside for someone about to walk out and face a former top 3 player under lights in front of thousands. No elaborate pre-match ritual for the cameras. No superstition performed for an audience. Just the same small, repeatable process, match after match. Whether the opponent across the net has 4 Grand Slam semifinals to her name or none at all. It is, in its own way, the least dramatic preparation imaginable for someone whose matches keep producing this much drama. Rewind 14 months and there is almost nothing here. Just a name. Ranked 140, grinding through lower-tier events most tennis fans have never heard of. The kind of tournaments that don't get broadcast, don't get highlight reels, just get played in front of a few hundred people and a scoreboard that nobody outside the venue is watching. Then the climb starts, and it does not stop. A title at the Birmingham Open, her first at that level, the kind of win that gets a small mention and nothing more at the time. A semi-final run at the Berlin Open follows soon after, and it's there, for the first time, that she meets Svitolina and beats her, 6-3, 6-4 on grass. A result that looked at the time like a very good afternoon, rather than the start of anything larger. Weeks later, Wimbledon, she walks into the 4th round having beaten the defending champion on that very grass court, and becomes the first Filipina in the Open era to reach the second week of a Grand Slam. A sentence that had never been written about anyone from her country before that day. Her ranking climbs to a career high inside the top 30. By that point, The gap separating her in the rankings from established names already sitting comfortably in the top 30 had shrunk to almost nothing. A handful of points in some cases, the kind of margin that usually takes years to close, not months. Then, Washington, and the draw does her no favors at all. First round, an Olympic gold medalist, gone in 3 sets. 6-4 in the decider after dropping the opening set. Second round, the defending champion of this very tournament, a player who had already beaten her once this season in straight sets back in Stuttgart, erased from 1 game to 5 down in the second set, 6-2, 7-6. And now the quarterfinal. Svitolina again. 6-3, 6-4 again. Same score. Same result. A 6th win over a top 10 opponent this season alone. By some counts, her 8th of the year against players of that caliber. 3 defending champions removed from 3 different tournaments within a matter of weeks. Reportedly 30-plus match wins already banked this season, more than most players on tour will manage in the entire calendar year. The rise is not a hot streak anymore. It is a direction, and it has not slowed down once. But it was not clean. It never is. Deep in the second set, up a set, everything under control, and then it wasn't. Svitolina found her rhythm, the one that made her a top 3 player for a stretch of her career. Patient and heavy, and designed to wear an opponent down over 3 hours if that's what it takes. 2 breaks of serve in a row. 1 game to 3 down, the match visibly tilting, the kind of moment that has ended 100 careers in progress before they properly began. This is what a top 10 defender's experience actually looks like up close. Not from a highlight clip, but in real-time heavy topspin landing deep. Angles opening up that weren't there 2 games earlier. A rhythm designed specifically to make a younger opponent start doubting the game plan that got her this far in the first place. For a few games, it worked exactly the way it's supposed to work. The crowd sensed it, that shift in noise that happens right before a young player's night quietly starts to end early. Somewhere in that stretch, a double fault at the wrong moment. A rushed forehand pulled long by a foot. The kind of small cracks that, against a player with Svitolina's experience and patience, tend to widen into something much bigger, much faster than anyone expects. Even the players in the locker room watching on a monitor between their own matches would have recognized the shape of what was happening. They had seen this exact sequence play out against dozens of other young hopefuls over the years, and it almost never ended the way anyone hoped it would. This is the part of the story where the young player usually finds out what she's really made of under real pressure, on a real stage, against a real veteran who has broken far more promising careers than this one looked from the outside. And the answer usually disappoints her. Except it didn't. Because here is the strange part. The part that should make every single player left in this draw nervous heading into the weekend, the collapse that almost happened, is exactly what made this win mean more, not less. A 1-3 deficit against a player of Svitolina's caliber isn't a footnote you skip past on the way to the final score. It's the actual test. The only part of the match that tells you anything real about who someone is when things stop going their way. And she passed it live, in real time, in front of a crowd that had already started quietly writing the other ending in their heads. From 1-3 down, she did not panic her way back with wild, low-percentage swings. The kind of desperate hero ball that usually makes a bad situation worse. She simply kept doing the one thing she had been doing since love, all take the ball early. Give Svitolina no time to reset, no room to breathe into her own rhythm, no 2 seconds to get her feet back underneath her the way her entire game depends on. 6 breaks of serve landed on Svitolina's game across the full match. 6 times, the single most reliable part of a 20-time WTA title winner's entire toolkit, simply stopped holding. Stopped being the safe harbor it has been for over a decade. That's not luck stacking up twice in one match. That's someone who has figured out something specific about how to take control back the exact moment it slips away from her, and who does not appear to carry the previous few lost games with her into the next one, the way almost every other player on tour does, whether they admit it or not. Watch the walk between points if you go back and rewatch it. No shoulders dropped. No racket slammed into the strings in frustration. Just the same rhythm, game after game, point after point, whether she's up a break or 3 games down and the whole match is supposed to be slipping away. Compare that to how these matches usually go for a player this young against an opponent this experienced. The common story in tennis is momentum one player seizes it. The other spends the rest of the match chasing it back and usually never quite catches it in time. That story simply did not apply here. There was no visible moment where belief drained out of her game and had to be rebuilt from nothing. The deficit came and went like weather, present for a few minutes and then gone, with no lasting damage to anything that mattered once the next point started. And that is exactly why this story travels so much further than a tennis scoreline ever could on its own. Because underneath the rankings and the technical breakdown of footwork and timing, this is a story about being written off before anyone even gave you the chance to prove otherwise. A country with no history of producing a top 30 tennis player. Watching one of their own walk onto a hard court in Washington and calmly dismantle a former world number 3 for the second time in a single month. Filipino flags scattered through the stands of a WTA 500 event that, a year ago, most of that crowd couldn't have told you was even happening, let alone circled on a calendar. Fans back home reportedly staying up well past midnight, Manila time, just to catch a live stream of a quarterfinal being played on the other side of the planet, refreshing scoreboards on their phones during work hours because the live broadcast wasn't accessible where they were. It's the same feeling that pulls people toward every underdog story worth telling, in any sport, in any country. In any language, the specific private satisfaction of watching someone prove they were never actually behind, just underestimated by everyone who never bothered to look closely enough. You don't need to know a single rule of tennis to feel that particular kind of pride sit in your chest. It shows up in smaller ways too, the kind that don't make the highlight package. Local sports bars back home, reportedly staying open later than usual on quarterfinal night, screens tuned to a stream nobody would have bothered putting on a year earlier, group chats among people who couldn't have named a single other player on the WTA Tour, all suddenly fluent in breakpoints and second-set comebacks because one 21-year-old gave them a reason to learn. That is what a genuine breakthrough does to a country that has never had one in a sport before. It does not just create a fan of one player, it creates an audience for an entire sport that did not really exist there a year ago. Because this is not close to finished. This is, if anything, just the part of the story where things start getting harder, not easier. Sunday, in that same city, she faces Naomi Osaka, 4 Grand Slam titles, a former world number 1, currently ranked 13th in the world, a player who does not want long rallies at all, a player built to end points in 3 shots instead of 30. Osaka fought her own way into this semifinal, beating Ashlyn Kruger by retirement in the round before. Then grinding past Elisabetta Cocchiaretto in 3 full sets, 4-6, 6-4, 6-3, a match Osaka herself admitted afterward felt more like a mental match than an actual tennis match. It is a matchup with zero history between them, not one professional meeting on record, no film either player can study late at night before Sunday. No blueprint to lean on the way there was against Fernandez, the way there clearly was against Svitolina twice over. This is the first genuinely unknown variable in a run that has, until now, always come with at least some kind of readable pattern underneath it. Beyond that one match, there is a hard deadline sitting on the calendar. The US Open seeding cutoff lands on August 24th. Where she sits in the rankings on that exact date decides whether she avoids a top 10 opponent in the very first round of the year's final Grand Slam, decides whether the entire draw in New York opens up in front of her or closes early before it's even begun. And beyond even that, a ranking that keeps climbing toward the top 25 and shows no sign of leveling off. A RSM that keeps adding top 10 scalps at a pace almost no other 21-year-old currently on tour can match. A floor that keeps rising every single time someone assumes they've already seen her ceiling. Toronto and Cincinnati are next on the calendar right after this. Back-to-back WTA 1000 events, the tier just below a Grand Slam. Both stacked with the kind of fields that would have looked terrifying to her 18 months ago and now just look like the next 2 weeks of work. Neither one is going to get easier than what just happened in Washington. Zoom out far enough, and the shape of the season becomes hard to argue with. A player who started the year outside the top 140 is now a genuine threat to finish it inside the top 20, with 3 WTA 1000 events and a US Open seeding decision still to come. Every one of those is a chance to either confirm what Washington just suggested or quietly walk it back. Nobody who has watched the last 6 weeks is betting on the second option. Svitolina has been ranked third in the world. She has 20 titles to her name. She has been doing this at an elite level for over a decade. And twice now, 31 days apart, on 2 different continents, on 2 different surfaces, she has lost to the same 21-year-old by the exact same score. That is not something you can explain away with a bad night, or a slow surface, or a favorable draw. That is a pattern with a name attached to it now, and the name is Alex Eala. Somewhere in that stadium, long after the last point was played and the players had already left the court, a flag with 3 stars and a sun was still being held up in the stands, catching the last of the floodlights. So here's what I actually want to know from you. Was this the moment you started paying attention to her, or were you already watching long before Washington ever happened? Drop it in the comments below. I genuinely want to know who saw this coming before the rest of the tennis world caught up. In a few years, when everyone knows this name you'll want a record of when you knew first.